And time to take a look at what's been making headlines across the world. And for that, I'm joined in the studio by Solange Moujan. Hi, Solange.
Hi, Annette.
And you're starting off with, obviously, that escalating violence in Israel and Gaza.
Yeah, and as the Jerusalem Post tells us on its front page, Israel is massing ground troops along the border with Gaza. The paper says 9,000 reservists have been called up in the event of an all-out war with Hamas. And the paper Israel Hayom says that Israel's defense forces, the IDF, are, quote, putting the pressure on while combating multiple fronts, be it the rockets by Hamas flying over or the clashes continuing to break out in a number of cities between Arab Israelis and Jews and with Palestinians as well. In regard to these clashes, the Saudi-based Arab News says that the escalation has brought communities to the brink of civil war, while the pan-Arabic site Sharq al-Awsat says that these street fights are more akin to an Arab Spring, but this time for Arab Israelis and Palestinians, a sort of we've had enough of the injustice moment for them. Israel, the paper says as well, has returned the world's attention to the Palestinian cause, and it has which had largely been forgotten, and it has, quote, ignited a dangerous fuse in its backyard, and a fire will follow, end quote.
Now, the Israeli and foreign press are analysing who, on the political front, will be a winner or a loser as a result of this violence.
Yeah, The Guardian argues that Benjamin Netanyahu has everything to gain here. He was on the way out because of corruption scandals and an inability to form governments, and now the conflict is providing some sort of temporary, at least, protection. And the losers here, according to the Jerusalem Post, is Mahmoud Abbas. The Israeli paper says that Palestinians and foreign leaders feel he is no longer a relevant player in the conflict. Haaretz goes a step further than that, and asking if Abbas's sidelining is intentional. In an opinion piece, the Israeli paper argues that, quote, Hamas and Netanyahu are going in a long, stable, profitable romance and are not sworn enemies. That Netanyahu has, quote, never intended to topple Hamas's rule, that he keeps strengthening the organization de facto and intentionally to weaken the Palestinian Authority, end quote. So again, many viewpoints here, as well as a lot of fear and sadness.
Turning now to the UK, where the government's immigration policy is being criticised by a number of media outlets due to a number of interesting incidents.
Yeah, think again, Home Office. That is the message in the Scottish Daily Record today. Hundreds of protesters, you see them there, came out to block an immigration raid in Glasgow in a nearly 8-hour standoff. 2 men who were being detained on suspicions of immigration irregularities and offences. They were released from the border agency van, and as Metro tells us, Scotland's First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, condemned the Home Office for the timing of the raid, saying, quote, in the context of the Eid holiday and in the context of the coronavirus, it created a dangerous and unacceptable situation. Now, this isn't the only event that the Home Office is being pushed back against in the press. The Guardian says that it's coming under fire for detaining at least a dozen European nationals, most of them young women who were legally visiting the UK for job interviews, for internships, for example. And the paper tells us that a number of people were pulled aside at airports. They were taken to detention centers. They were threatened with deportation. And many say they weren't actually even allowed to contact their embassies or seek legal counsel. So a big switch there in this post-Brexit world.
Extraordinary, is all I'm going to say. Now to France, where the Paris Town Hall says they're going to change how we experience the city.
Yeah, a little bit of lighter news for us here. L'Opinion tells us that the Paris mayor's office has said it wants to turn the center of Paris into a permanent no-car zone by next year. Now, the plan, which is the latest in a long battle by City Hall to make Paris greener, it would turn the 1st through 4th arrondissement, as well as parts of the 5th and 6th, into no-car zones. Now, residents, delivery vans, buses, service vehicles, they would be allowed, but the move would cut down, get this, 180,000 cars that pass through the city every day. Yeah, that's a lot of cars. Now, of course, it is a hotly debated issue among Parisians, but it could be great news for Paris walkers and bicyclists.
And finally, Solange, you found a rather interesting piece that begs the question, is there indeed anyone out there? I'm talking about, of course, aliens.
Yes, and this is actually a very serious question that the New York Times is posing today. Do aliens exist? And if they do, how would we react? In an article entitled, "If You Ever Think Discussing Aliens is Ridiculous, Just Hear Me Out," Ezra Klein, he takes us through the fact that a number of senior-level American officials, they actually believe aliens exist. And he does this to lend some sort of some credibility to the zaniness of the article, which he calls a thought experiment. But he isn't trying to convince us that aliens exist. Rather, he wants to hypothesize about what we would do if they did. He imagines that for some of us it would be old news after a few days, that we would just accept it. For others, it might make them angry against their governments for supposedly hiding this. Or it might, and this is where I think it's fun, change our worldview in a positive way. He says it could make us better humans. We would pay more attention to our planet. It may, he says, make us strive for better.
Interesting. Well, on that note, thank you so much, Solange.